Millionaire left a $0 tip, but the single mom waitress found a secret note under his plate. The receipt fell to the floor, landing face up on the gleaming tile. In the tip section, there was only a huge 0, cold and humiliating. A few staff members curled their lips into smirks as the billionaire walked out, leaving Emma, an exhausted single mother, alone with a dirty table to clean. She needed that money to buy heart medication for her son. But as she lifted the plate, a thin slip of paper slid out. Not cash. A handwritten note, just 7 words. And those 7 words changed her life and exposed the true nature of the billionaire. Emma Carter had grown so accustomed to the aches in her body that at times she could no longer tell where ordinary exhaustion ended and where warning signs began. Her legs felt as if they were carrying 2 heavy blocks of lead, each step sending a dull, persistent ache up her calves. The black non-slip shoes, bought hastily during a sale, had long since worn down at the heels, yet she still could not replace them. Money always had to be reserved for things that mattered more. Like Noah's medication, Emma's shift that day had started at 7 in the morning, and now it was nearly 10 at night. She had been on her feet the entire time, moving non-stop, carrying expensive dishes to people who had never had to wonder whether they would have enough money to pay their bills the next day. In the small mirror hanging in the staff corridor, Emma caught a glimpse of her face. Most of her light makeup had worn off. Dark circles framed her eyes from lack of sleep, yet her gaze still tried to hold on to a necessary calm. "Emma, table 5 needs more water." "Emma, the guest says the bread is cold." "Emma, hurry up!" Mr. Collins's voice rang out constantly, brief and sharp like a blade. He never yelled. He did not need to. A single glance was enough to make Emma understand that she was not allowed to be late by even a second. He disliked Emma, or at least had no fondness for her. Not because she worked poorly, but because she always refused to stay late to clean after her shift without extra pay. Emma needed to leave early to pick up her son from the babysitters, needed to catch the last bus, needed to be there when Noah woke up in the middle of the night with his familiar bouts of shortness of breath. At the payment counter, Lily Moore was standing there, adjusting her lipstick. Lily was a few years younger than Emma, pretty and well aware of how to use it to her advantage. She spoke sweetly to wealthy customers, ignoring families with children because they didn't tip much. Lily always earned more money than Emma and never missed an opportunity to remind her of that fact. Inside Emma's apron pocket, a crumpled envelope brushed against her hip each time she moved. It was the final notice from the pharmacy. The bold print at the bottom of the page screamed inside her head. Payment due before Friday. Today was Wednesday. Emma had earned $43 in tips throughout the entire day. That amount was not enough for even half of Noah's medication, let alone saving for the surgery the doctors kept mentioning in grave tones. She thought back to that morning when Noah sat on the bed, arms wrapped tightly around his old pillow, breathing in short, shallow breaths. The boy had still smiled at her, still said, "I'm fine, Mom, don't worry," even though his breathing sounded as if it were being squeezed shut. That smile was what pulled Emma out of despair every day. And it was also what made the fear inside her grow heavier. She wiped her hands quickly on a towel and took a deep breath before returning to the dining floor. Emma did not have the right to collapse. Not now. Not when her son was depending on every dollar she earned from strangers' tables. Emma had just set the tray of glasses down on the counter when Lily Moore approached, a dark brown leather menu in her hand. She did not ask. She simply tilted her head toward the corner of the restaurant, concealed by heavy velvet curtains, where the special guests usually sat. "VIP booth," Lily said, the corner of her mouth lifting. Someone just came in. Emma followed Lily's gaze. The silhouette of a man in a dark suit stood out beneath the restaurant's soft lighting. He sat perfectly upright, one hand resting on the table, the other moving swiftly across his phone screen. No introduction was needed for Emma to know who he was. Alexander Vaughn. The name did not need to be spoken aloud. It carried its own weight. A billionaire in logistics and technology, owner of a vast shipping empire spanning the world's major ports. The press called him ruthless. "You're not taking that table?" Emma asked calmly. Lily let out a soft laugh, sharp, not amused. "I've served him before. 3 times he sent the food back because it wasn't to his liking. Never tips. There's no way I'm putting myself through that again." She shoved the menu into Emma's hands. "You're a better fit for that kind of customer." Emma tightened her grip on the edge of the menu. She knew the restaurant's unspoken rule: no one refused a table, especially a VIP one. A single complaint from Alexander Vaughn would be enough for Mr. Collins to fire her on the spot. She took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and walked toward the corner of the room. When Emma stopped at the table, Alexander Vaughn did not look up immediately. The blue glow of his phone illuminated his face, sharpening its cold, angular features. His perfectly tailored suit hugged his tall frame, radiating authority without any need for display. "Good evening, sir," Emma said, forcing a professional smile. "My name is Emma. I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with a drink?" "Sparkling water," he replied, his voice low and decisive. "Room temperature. No ice?" Emma nodded. "Yes, sir." "And a slice of lemon," he added, finally lifting his gaze to her. His steel-gray eyes swept over Emma's face, pausing for a beat. "But no peel. I don't want the bitterness from the oils." Emma blinked for a fraction of a second, then lowered her head. "I understand." "Don't keep me waiting," Alexander said, his attention already back on his phone. "I have a call in 40 minutes. She turned away, her heart beating faster than usual. That was not merely a request. It was a reminder that his time was more valuable than anyone else's in the room. At the bar, Emma carefully sliced the lemon, meticulously removing the thin yellow peel. Her hands trembled slightly, not from difficulty, but because she knew she was being evaluated. This was the kind of request powerful people used to see how far others were willing to bend. When she returned, Alexander Vaughn lifted the glass, gently rotating it to inspect the clear slice of lemon. He took a sip, then set the glass down. "Acceptable," he said. Not a thank you, not a nod. Just a verdict. Emma exhaled quietly. She straightened, ready for the next step, even as a vague intuition settled in her chest that tonight would not end like any shift before it. This guest was not here merely to have dinner. He was here to test her limits. "Would you like to order now, Mr. Vaughn?" Emma asked. The man did not look at the menu. He placed it on the table, aligned with cold precision. "Yes," he said. "I want the pan-seared cod, but no lemon butter sauce. Replace it with extra virgin olive oil. And I don't want mashed potatoes. Substitute grilled vegetables, no salt." Emma paused her pen for a brief moment. She turned away, her heart pounding harder than she cared to admit. From the counter, Lily Moore glanced at her, the corner of her mouth curling into a smile that anticipated the outcome. Lily did not need to ask to know what was happening in that booth. In the kitchen, heat rose in heavy waves. When Emma read the order back, the sous chef frowned. "No sauce? No salt?" He shook his head. "Please," Emma said softly, almost pleading. "That's Alexander Vaughn. If the dish gets sent back, I'll be the one held responsible." The sous chef studied her for a few seconds, then turned away, tossing his words over his shoulder. "Make it exactly as requested. But if he's not satisfied, you deal with it." The next 20 minutes dragged on heavily. Emma continued serving other tables, but her eyes kept drifting back to the curtained corner. Vaughn checked his watch. His finger tapped lightly on the tabletop, steady, unhurried, and it was precisely that calm that made everyone around him tense. At last, the dish was ready. White cod, its skin crisp and thin, grilled vegetables arranged neatly like a blueprint. Emma set the plate down. "Your dish, Mr. Vaughn." He did not respond. He picked up his knife, cut a small piece, and tasted it slowly. Emma stepped back half a pace. Seconds passed. "Acceptable," he said. "No praise, no criticism." "Is there anything else I can get for you?" Emma asked, following the safest script. "Yes." He looked up. "Sit down." Emma froze. "Just a minute," he said, pointing to the chair opposite him. "I don't like talking to someone who's trembling while standing." It violated policy, but refusing would not carry lighter consequences. Emma sat on the edge of the chair. "You don't belong here," Vaughn said bluntly. "The way you look at this dining room, you're calculating, not serving." Emma remained silent. "You dislike your manager," he continued. "You dislike the coworkers smiling at you right now, and you resent having to apologize for things that aren't your fault." Emma clenched her hands beneath the table. "I work here because I need money," she said, "not because I dream of serving." "Money for whom?" he asked. The question fell lightly, but struck its target. "For my son," Emma replied quietly. "Noah, 6 years old, a weak heart. I need every shift to keep his treatment schedule from being interrupted." Alexander Vaughn studied her for a long time. His expression did not soften. "So you're placing your child's future on tips," he said. "That's not a plan. That's gambling." The words were sharp as a blade. Emma stood up. "I'm not gambling, sir. I'm working, and if you don't need anything else, I'll excuse myself." She turned away before her emotions could betray her. In the staff area, she stopped for exactly 1 minute, drew in a deep breath, and forced herself to stand straight. "Don't cry. Don't collapse. Get the check. Finish the shift. Go home to Noah." When Emma returned to the booth, the chair was empty. Alexander Vaughn had already left, without a single note. She walked to the table and opened the leather bill holder. Her heart pounded as her eyes scanned the total. A small, foolish part of her still hoped that at the very least he had left something, a symbolic amount, a minimal gesture of acknowledgement. There was nothing. The word tip had been crossed out with a firm, decisive stroke. The number 0 sat alone on the white paper, cold, precise, and cruelly perfect. Emma felt the blood drain from her body. This was not mere disappointment. It was humiliation, carefully calculated. Alexander Vaughn had not forgotten to tip. He wanted her to see that number. He wanted her to understand that, in his eyes, all her effort was worth nothing. "Oh my God, 0 again?" a voice sounded behind her. Lily Moore had appeared at some point, tilting her head as she looked at the receipt. "I told you, the Ice King never changes." Emma did not respond. Her throat tightened, too constricted for a single word to escape. From the front of the restaurant, Mr. Collins barked orders to clear the table for a new group of guests. No one cared about that 0. Only Emma knew how heavy it was. She bit her lip and bent down to clean. The large plate was lifted first, and in that exact moment, something thin and firm slipped out of place and landed softly on the tabletop. Emma froze. It was not money, not a napkin. It was a neatly folded piece of paper, off-white, thick, expensive. She glanced around quickly. Lily had turned away. Mr. Collins was busy yelling at another employee. Emma unfolded the paper. The handwriting was sharp and decisive, just like Alexander Vaughn himself. "If you truly believe you will do anything to save your son, prove it. Pier 47, East Warehouse, midnight, come alone." Emma felt her heart sink. Midnight, a warehouse, alone. She folded the note quickly and slipped it into her apron pocket, right next to the pharmacy notice envelope. Emma looked up at the clock mounted high on the lobby wall. 10:45 p.m., 15 minutes until her shift ended. A span of time short enough for everything to collapse, and long enough for her to make an irreversible decision. She had two paths. One was to walk out of the restaurant, catch the last bus, return to her cramped apartment, and the next morning bow her head again at the pharmacy counter, hoping someone might soften their heart one more time. The other was to go straight to Pier 47, where the man who had just left was waiting, and find out for herself what Alexander Vaughn truly wanted from her. Emma untied her apron strings and folded it neatly. She had never been the type to believe in gambles. She believed in work, in plans, in careful, deliberate steps. But for Noah, if forced to choose between safety and a fragile chance, she was willing to step into the darkness, as long as there was even a sliver of light for her son. She stood at the bus stop, the night wind cutting through her thin jacket. Her phone vibrated. A message from the babysitter. Noah is asleep. Breathing was a bit difficult today, but he's okay now. Emma closed her eyes. The image of Noah lying in a hospital bed surfaced with painful clarity. So small, so frail, yet always smiling at her as if she were the one who needed comforting. Emma boarded the bus. 2 transfers, then a long walk through a deserted industrial zone. Gray metal warehouses lined up like massive concrete blocks, silent and cold. Fog from the harbor rolled in, carrying the smell of salt water and engine oil. Pier 47 emerged beneath a single high-mounted floodlight. A black SUV was parked beside it, engine idling softly. Emma checked her watch. 11:58. I must be crazy, she muttered, tightening her grip on her bag strap. A large man stepped out of the SUV, wearing a headset, his sharp eyes scanning her. Name? Emma Carter. He nodded, spoke briefly into his radio, then pointed toward a metal door. Straight in. There's light at the end. The steel door opened with a heavy screech. Inside was a vast, empty space, shipping containers stacked into cold walls. At the center, beneath harsh white industrial lighting, stood a folding table and 2 metal chairs. Alexander Vaughn was sitting there. He was no longer wearing his suit jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing arms more solid than Emma had imagined. In front of him lay a thick stack of documents. He did not look up as Emma approached. "You're 2 minutes early," he said. "Sit." Emma pulled out a chair. The cold metal seeped through her thin clothing, making her spine tense. "Why did you call me here?" she asked, keeping her voice steady as her fingers intertwined beneath the table. Alexander Vaughn slid the stack of documents toward her. The paper rustled across the cold metal surface, the sound echoing clearly in the vast warehouse. "These are my company's shipping reports for the past 3 months, he said evenly, without emotion. "Hundreds of containers, dozens of routes. We're losing money." Emma looked down at the pages. Dense numbers, container codes, departure times, weights, destinations. To most people, it was meaningless chaos. To executives trained at elite schools, it was data for software to analyze. But Emma did not see it that way. "The board says it's market volatility," Alexander continued. "The CFO blames fuel costs. I think they're either incompetent or lying." Emma swallowed. "What do you want me to do?" "Find the problem," Alexander replied immediately. "You have 1 hour." 1 hour with hundreds of pages. Emma did not protest. She pulled the documents closer, took a deep breath, and began turning pages. Years of waiting tables had trained her in one habit: see the whole picture, but never miss the details. One crowded table, one complicated bill, a small mistake could cause real trouble. She started taking notes. Container 118, electronics, departure weight higher than arrival weight, small discrepancy, possibly negligible. Container 244, high-end textiles, nearly 6% missing. Emma paused. She kept flipping. Container 391, tech components, short 5.8%. Container 405, luxury goods, short 6.1%. This is normal, Alexander said without looking up from his own papers. Shrinkage, moisture, packaging. Emma did not reply. She kept turning pages. A pattern slowly emerged, faint at first, then unmistakable. Not all containers were short, only the high-value ones. And the loss was always between 5 and 7%, too small to trigger alarms, too consistent to be random. Emma picked up her pen and circled a column of signatures at the bottom of each manifest, a mark resembling the letter M, sharp and angular. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice firmer now. Alexander stopped writing. He looked at where Emma was pointing. "Dock supervisor at the port, just a mark." "Look at the other shipments," Emma said quickly, pushing several pages toward him. "The ones without losses. Different signatures, perfectly matched weights." She grabbed the calculator on the table and began entering numbers. Years of making change, splitting bills among drunk customers, and managing every dollar in a household budget had made numbers familiar to her. "On average, shipments with this signature lose 6.2%, Emma said. "This isn't an accident, it's deliberate." Alexander stood and stepped closer. He stared at the figures, his eyes sharpened. "The crane's automated scale records the real weight," Emma continued, pointing to the last column. "But the manual reports were altered. Goods were removed before sealing. Then the numbers were reduced to conceal it." The space fell silent. Alexander closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them. "Matthew," he said quietly. "Matthew Vaughn. His brother-in-law." Emma pulled her hands back, her heart pounding. She had just identified a thief, and that thief was family. I could be wrong," she said, instinctively retreating. "I'm just—" "No," Alexander cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. "You're right." He looked at Emma as if seeing her for the first time. Not a server, not a desperate woman, but someone who could see through layers an entire team of experts had missed. Alexander Vaughn stood still for a long moment. The industrial light exposed the fatigue in his face, lines usually hidden behind power and control. Emma sat motionless, hands clasped tightly beneath the table. She did not dare speak. The truth had been revealed. It was no longer her problem. It belonged to him. Finally, Alexander returned to the table. He opened the leather briefcase at his feet and took out a thick checkbook, heavy cream-colored paper, the kind Emma had only seen in movies. He uncapped his pen, his expression calm to the point of coldness, and began to write. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper echoed in the silence. Alexander tore the check free and slid it toward Emma. "Take it." Emma looked down. Her heart seemed to stop for a moment. $500,000. Payee, Emma Carter. She stood up reflexively. "No, I can't. You don't need to." "I just saved more than $3 million a year," Alexander interrupted, his voice not loud but commanding. "You earned it." Emma felt her eyes burn. She thought of Noah, of the stark white hospital room, of the doctor's words about a surgery that could not be delayed. This money was not just help. It was her son's life. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Alexander nodded, then continued, as if this were only the beginning. "But this only solves today." Emma looked up. "What about tomorrow?" he asked. "Recovery, your son's education, your life? Will you go back to that restaurant, stand 12 hours a day, waiting for random money from other people's goodwill?" The question landed heavily. "I need someone like you," Alexander said, his voice lowering. "Not an office worker trained to polish reports, but someone who sees the cracks in the system, someone who doesn't belong to my world." Emma shook her head slightly. "I don't have a degree." "I can teach business," he replied. "I can't teach instinct." Alexander extended his hand. "Work for me, special advisor, full-time, $250,000 a year. Private health insurance for your son." Emma stared at his hand. Strong, steady. A door opening, wide and terrifying. She thought of the zero on the receipt, thought of this night, thought that, perhaps for the first time in her life, someone was not pitying her, but trusting her. Emma reached out. "Okay," she said softly, "I accept." And in that moment, Emma Carter's life officially turned in a new direction. The transition from the cramped rented apartment on the edge of the city to Alexander Vaughn's estate did not feel like moving house. It felt like a brutal jump cut. Within 48 hours of the meeting at the port, Emma's world had been dismantled and reassembled according to a different order. That morning, a convoy bearing the Vaughn Logistics logo stopped in front of her aging building. Cardboard boxes were sealed, labeled, and then disappeared so quickly that Emma barely noticed when the room became empty. Noah was taken directly from the apartment into a private ambulance. No sirens, no noise. Just a prearranged route to the state's leading pediatric cardiac center, where his surgery had already been scheduled for the following week. Everything moved with such smooth efficiency that Emma felt both grateful and uneasy. That afternoon, she stood alone in the main hall of the Vaughn estate. The structure spread outward in glass, stone, and steel, opening onto a direct view of the calm gray sea. There was no classical grandeur, no warmth. It was beautiful in the cold way of things designed to outlast human beings. "Miss Carter," a middle-aged man appeared, his posture precise. "Mr. Vaughn is in the reading room. He wishes to see you immediately." Emma nodded. "Thank you." She walked down the corridor. The walls were lined with works she had only ever seen in books, their value enough to exchange for multiple lifetimes. There were no family photographs, no signs of personal memory. This house functioned more like a headquarters than a place where someone lived. The reading room opened. Alexander Vaughn stood with his back to her, a phone pressed to his ear, staring out at the horizon. "I don't need explanations," he said curtly. "If the reports don't reconcile, shut down the terminal. As for supervisory responsibility, we'll handle that separately." He ended the call and turned around. His gaze was heavy and alert. "You were right," he said. "Matthew confessed. Gambling debts. He's been suspended, and the file has been transferred to legal." Emma hesitated. I'm sorry. He is family, after all." Alexander let out a short laugh, entirely devoid of humor. "Family," he repeated, "usually just people who believe they're entitled to put their hands on what's yours. You'll grow accustomed to that concept here." 3 weeks later, Emma Carter could barely recognize her own life. Noah had undergone surgery successfully. For the first time in his life, the boy slept without a breathing support machine. Color returned to his cheeks, his smile fuller and more complete. Emma sat beside his hospital bed, holding his hand, believing that at last every sacrifice had been worth it. At the same time, within the Vaughn Corporation, Emma was no longer merely a special advisor in name. She had become the person Alexander Vaughn trusted most. She sat in strategic meetings, quietly observing seasoned CEOs lie behind polished smiles. She pointed out irregularities no one else noticed. Alexander began to ask for her opinion, first occasionally, then consistently. They worked late into the night. Office evenings turned into takeout containers, conversations stretching from books to belief, from strategy to Noah. Emma saw that beneath Alexander's cold exterior was a man living in constant vigilance, someone who had not allowed himself to trust anyone for far too long. And between them, a thin thread slowly tightened, unnamed, unspoken, yet felt by them both. 5 years later. That afternoon, The sea breeze drifted in slowly and warm, carrying the familiar scent of salt through the wide glass windows of the house on the hill. Emma stood in the kitchen, drying a glass, her eyes following Noah as he ran across the veranda. He was taller now, his breathing steady, his laughter full and unbroken. No machines, no more nights of panic over faltering heartbeats. The fragile heart of his childhood now beat strong and sure in the chest of a healthy boy. Alexander Vaughn entered the room, loosened his tie, and set his phone down on the table. The world outside still moved fast. Ports, numbers, power. But inside this house, time slowed. He stopped behind Emma, silent for a moment, long enough for her to sense the familiar presence. "Do you remember the receipt?" he asked quietly. Emma smiled. "I do. The coldest zero of my life." Alexander nodded. He reached into his jacket and placed a small matte black box on the wooden table. No speech, no staging. Just a moment, unguarded and real. "5 years ago," he said slowly, "you saw what an entire corporation failed to see. Not because you were smarter, but because you were used to living in the cracks. You didn't just save my company. You taught me how to trust again." He opened the box. The ring was simple, elegant, nothing excessive, nothing to prove. "Emma Carter," Alexander said, speaking her full name for the first time with unmistakable tenderness. "Will you marry me? Not to step into my world, but so we can build one together." Emma didn't answer right away. She looked at Noah on the veranda, then back at the man in front of her. No longer the ice king of headlines, but someone who had learned how to stay. She nodded, tears falling softly, her smile steady. "Yes, I will." The wedding took place in autumn, by the sea. Not large, not extravagant. Noah stood beside them, holding Emma's hand tightly, his eyes bright as he called Alexander Dad, with a natural ease that surprised them all. In his short speech, Alexander did not speak of success or strategy. He spoke of a receipt with a zero, of a woman who refused to bow, and of a child who taught him the true value of life. 2 years later, the house welcomed a new cry. Their child slept peacefully in Emma's arms, breathing warm and even. Alexander stood by the window, looking out at the sea, then turned back and rested a hand on her shoulder. The world beyond remained sharp and unforgiving. But here, among unhurried evenings and simple meals, they had chosen each other, not because of a miracle, but because they had walked through the darkness and decided to remain in the light together.